Welcome. I was just reading some Hopi legends. Started with this one, which led me, I found this website because I was watching a video and was interested in Hopi Indian caretaker of the earth, Masaw, which led me to here, then led me to reading this. Fourth world. The world, he said, the world complete. So then I said, oh, return to Hopi legends. I started looking through here, and I noticed, well, if that's about the fourth world, maybe I should check out the first world. So let's just read it. I thought I'd just go through these. It very much reminds me of, I think, other things I've heard, unless it, like, with, like, sacred geometry, starting from, like, void to create the flower of life from some, like, point moving to a second point, creating, I don't remember all the basis, but it kind of gave me that vibe. The first world was Takpela, endless space. Before that, there was only the creator, Taowa. All else was endless space. There was no beginning or end, no time, no shape, no life. There was only an immeasurable void that had its beginning and end, its time, its shape, and its life in the mind of Taowa. Then the infinite Taowa conceived the finite. First he created Sotuknang to make it manifest. Taowa said to him, I have created the first power and instrument as a person to carry out my plan for life in endless space. I am your uncle. You are my nephew. This kind of gives me vibes of, like, father son, of like Christian, but in an uncle nephew way. Interesting. Go now and lay out these universes in proper order so they may work together in harmony according to my plan. So Taknang did as he was commanded. From endless space he gathered that which was to be manifest as solid substance, molded it into forms, and arranged them into 9 universal kingdoms, one for Taowa the creator, one for himself, and 7 universes for the life to come. When he was finished, he went to Taowa and asked, Is this according to your plan? Yes, said Taowa, it is very good. Now do the same for the waters, dividing them equally upon the surfaces of each of these universes. So Satuknang gathered from endless space that which was to be manifest as the waters. He placed them on the universes, so that each would be half solid and half water. When he was finished, he went to Taowa and asked, Is this according to your plan? Yes, it is very good. The next thing now is to put the forces of air into peaceful movement about all. So earth, water, and then air. So Satuknang did. From endless space he gathered that which was to be manifest as the airs. He made them into great forces and arranged them into gentle, ordered movement around each universe. When he was finished, he went to Taowa and asked, Is this according to your plan? Yes, said Taowa, you have done a great work according to my plan. You have created the universes and made them manifest into solid waters and winds, put them into their proper places, but your work is not finished. Now you must create life and its movements to complete the 4 parts Tawakwachi of my universal plan. So then it says the end of the first world. So the first people multiplied and spread over the face of the land and were happy. So it's got a very biblical Torah kind of vibe to that sense. Although they were of different colors and spoke different languages, they felt as one and understood each other without talking. Which is interesting to think about. The first people spoke different languages. I mean, sure, different colors. That kind of makes sense. Like, I guess it doesn't make sense either. It makes sense to me more than the different languages, honestly. Like, if they're coming from the same points, if you will, then they would probably be more similar, but it shows more of like a disparate sources, like almost like our world, where people then, the first people on a new world, maybe on the first world, spread over the face of the land and were happy, even though they were different colors and spoke different languages, because they were basically from a different world that perhaps was destroyed as part of what the process that is mentioned in these legends as a potential, not like inherent from what I've read, which is interesting. They felt as one and understood each other without talking. It was the same with the birds and the animals. They all suckled at the breast of their Mother Earth, who gave them milk of grass, seeds, fruit, and corn, and they all felt as one, people and animals. But gradually there were those who forgot the commands of Satutnang and the Spider Woman to respect their creator. More and more, they used the vibratory centers solely for earthly purposes, forgetting that their primary purpose was to carry out the plan of creation. Then there came Lavahoya, the talker. He came in the form of a bird called Makni, a bird like a mockingbird, and the more he kept talking, the more he convinced them of the differences between them, the difference between people and animals, and the differences between the people themselves by reason of the color of their skins, their speech, and their beliefs in the plan of the Creator. It was then that the animals drew away from the people. The guardian spirit of animals laid his hands on their hind legs just below the tail, making them become wild and scatter from the people in fear. You can see this slightly oily spot today on deer and antelope on the sides of their back legs as they throw up their tails to run away. In the same way, people, I don't know if that's true, I think it's probably true relatively, like that there are markings of that nature sometimes, whether or not it's universally on them. Like that's probably something that would. Anyway, in the same way, people began to divide and draw one away from one another. Those of different races and languages, then those who remembered the plan of creation, and those who did not. That's interesting. People began to divide and draw away from one another, those of different races and languages, initially, kind of like now, like what's going on now. Then, those who remembered the plan of creation and those who did not. Like that became the focal point where like people were not remembering and people were like, hey, there's a plan of creation, hey. And it created like a tension, a divide. There came among them a handsome one, Katoya, in the form of a snake with a big head. He led the people still further away from each other in their pristine wisdom. They became suspicious of one another and accused one another wrongfully until they became fierce and warlike and began to fight one another. I was just thinking, I wonder if like one of these is like Krishna, one is Vishnu, one is Brahman, maybe equivalent, and like it's just a different angle of seeing the same beings that have many names but were existent, maybe, at a time in the first world's time. But among all the people of different races and languages, there were a few in every group who still lived. Or maybe I went a little too far. All the time, Magni kept talking, and Katoya became more beguiling. There was no rest, no peace. But among all the people of different races and languages, there were a few in every group who still lived by the laws of creation. To them came Soyaknang. He came with sound as of a mighty wind and suddenly appeared before them. He said, I have observed this state of affairs. It is not good. It is so bad that I talked to my uncle, Taiwa, about it. We have decided this world must be destroyed and another one created so you people can start over again. You are the ones we have chosen. They listened carefully to their instruction. Said Soyaknang, you will go to a certain place. Your Kopavi vibratory center on the top of the head will lead you. This inner wisdom will give you the sight to see a certain cloud which you will follow by day, and a certain star which you will follow by night. Take nothing with you. Your journey will not end until the cloud stops and the star stops. So all over the world, these chosen people suddenly disappeared from their homes and people and began following the cloud by day and the star by night. Many other people asked them where they were going, and when they were told, it laughed at them. We don't see any cloud or any star either, they said. This was because they had lost the inner vision of the Kopavi on the crowns of their heads, and the door was closed to them. Still, there were a very few people who went along anyway, because they believed the people who did see the cloud and the star. This was all right. After many days and nights, the first people arrived at the certain place. Soon others came and asked, What are you doing here? And they said, We were told by Sujak Nang to come here. And the other people said, We too were led here by the vapor and the star. They were all happy together because they were of the same mind and understanding, even though they were of different languages and races. When the last ones arrived, Suyak Nang appeared. Well, you are all here, you that I have chosen to save from the destruction of this world. Now come with me. Very, like, Noah-like, but different. He led them to a big mound where the ant people lived, stamped on the roof, and commanded the ant people to open up their home. When an opening was made on top of the ant hill, Suyak Nang said to the people, Now you will enter this ant kiva, where you will be safe when I destroy the world. While you are here, I want you to learn a lesson from these ant people. They are industrious. They gather food in the summer for the winter. They keep cool when it is hot and warm when it is cold. They live in peace with each other. They obey the plan of creation. So the people went down to live with the ant people. When they were all safe and settled, Taowa commanded Suyaknang to destroy the world. So Suyaknang destroyed it by fire because the fire clan had been its leaders. He rained fire upon it. He opened up the volcanoes. Fire came from above and below and all around until the earth, the waters, the air, all was one element, fire. And then there was nothing left except the people safe inside the womb of the earth. This was the end of Takpela, the first world. This description of fire really... Like, maybe it's the supernova of the Earth from the Earth's expansion. I was just kind of thinking it's possible. There's some subtleties here that I don't making me think of Mercury's supernova becoming Venus. Like maybe there's something going on under the surface more so. Reminds me of a paper I read today. Well, no, came across today. If I can find it. This one. Which apparently has some kind of core mantle boundary, like the way I haven't found it in this text to relate it to the article that I read, but it sounded like there was some like spiraling around the core, wrapping around the core, something to do with also Antarctica with the ultra low velocity zones where dense systems are. Made me think of a terminal. This reminded me of a terminal here. So I haven't seen one in Antarctica, but it's also partly because I can't see. But like right here in the North Pole is a North Pole, like an actual terminal that's dense with like more subtle material surrounding it. South Pole region of Antarctica, we just can't see in this data. I don't see any like distinct terminal type thing per se in the same way. Maybe it's hard to say. I was thinking maybe it's possible that it's not there and it's actually like down further, like a different layer down. Like there's a terminal coming out of the mantle that's on top of out of the core, like in the region of the core, whether it's out of or into, I don't know. That's basically a terminal. Maybe into would make more sense. That like actually is the equivalent of this here, but this is like at the. I think this is at the crust mantle boundary where this formed. I believe crust mantle boundary. So there's a mound of this nature as a terminal going up into, out of the crust, and into like the air, if you will, into like the next layer maybe. I don't know if it's into the air per se. It might actually be into the terrain, but into the crust. But then, yeah, into the crust, not into the air. Into the crust. But down here, maybe it's literally just lower, like on the opposite side, going into the, instead of out of the mantle into the crust, out of the mantle into the core as like a connection point between the two. So it spirals like through the layers, like out of the core from the southern pole up and around, and then having this here, like what I mean by spirals around, if I can find it. Animations. This one. Like it spirals to the terminal, like a shallow rim. But maybe it spirals from a first terminal that's more interior. Like an internal chakra, pretty much. Anyway, so that's going on. Let me. Did I read this one? Yeah, okay, we read this one. So the people went down to the. When they were all safe and settled, destroy the world, destroyed it by fire, and then there was nothing left except the people safe inside the womb of the earth. All was one element. So this was the end of the first world. And then the second world, the first people of Takpela, the first world, were safely sheltered underground as fire rained down upon the earth. Volcanoes and firestorms. I wonder if this is like Ramayana time frame. Destroyed all that was above them until the earth, the waters, and the air itself was all elemental fire. While while this was going on, I don't know if Ramayana has that level of death and destruction. I feel like it's really after the flood. I don't know what Hinduism says of like the death of all the people, pretty much. Like when that is in the storyline, like post Dwarka, pre Dwarka. I don't think it says like explicitly many people died after Dwarka was sunk. Like the global flood kind of concept. Anyway, my thoughts is maybe the thing I'm thinking is that maybe like the radioactive decay steps of certain steps that occurred were much more like ends of first world and then the second world and then the end of second world, third world. In this scale of things, where one of the like the end of the third world maybe is like the attack on Dwarka time frame. First world maybe something earlier that was much more fire based. I don't know. We're safely sheltered underground as fire rained down upon the earth. Volcanoes and firestorms destroyed all that was above them, until the earth, the waters, and the air itself was all elemental fire. While this was going on, the people lived happily underground with the ant people. Their homes were just like the people's homes on the earth's surface being destroyed. There were rooms to live in and rooms where they stored their food. There was light to see by, too. The tiny bits of crystals in the sand of the ant hill had absorbed the light of the sun, and using the inner vision of the center located between the eyes, they could see by its reflection very well. Inner vision of the third eye, I guess? Reflection. Only one thing troubled them. The food had begun to run short. It had not taken Sotaknang long to destroy the world. This really makes me feel like it was all one process. I don't. Nor would it take him long to create another one, but it was taking a long time for the first world to cool off before his second world could be created. That was why the food was running short. Do not give us as much food, so much of the food you have worked so hard to gather and store, the people said. You are our guests, the ant people said. What we have is yours also. So the ant people continued to deprive themselves of food in order to supply their guests. Every day they tied their belts tighter and tighter, and this is why ants today are so small around the waist. Cute. Finally, that which had been the first world cooled off. Sotakanang purified it. Then he began to create the second world. He changed its form completely, putting land where there was water, like in Canada, and water where there was land, so that the people, maybe like the Mediterranean, so that the people in the other places, like Southeast Asian area, where anywhere a continental shelf is underwater, pretty much, is plausibly at least a place that was once land that is now underwater. Certainly there are those places. Canada is a good example of one that is now land where there was water. Whether or not that where there was water was the first world, I don't know. Putting land where there was water and water where there was land, so that the people upon their emergence would have nothing to remind them of the previous wicked world. When all was ready, he came to the roof of the ant kiva, stomped on it, and gave his call. Immediately the chief of the ant people went up to the opening and rolled back the nutta, the straw hatch that covered the opening to the kiva. Young eye, come in, you are welcome, he called. So Teknang spoke first to the ant people. I am thanking you for doing your part in helping to save these people. It will always be remembered. This you have done. The time will come when another world will be destroyed. And when the wicked people know their last day on earth has come, they will sit by an ant hill and cry for the ants to save them. Now, having fulfilled your duty, you may go forth to the second world and take your place as ants. Then Sotaknang said to the people, make your emergence now to the second world I've created. It is not quite as beautiful as the first world, but is beautiful just the same. You will like it, so multiply and be happy, but remember your Creator and the laws He gave you. When I hear you sing joyful praises to Him, I will know you are my children, and you will be close to me in your hearts. So the people emerged to the second world. Its name was Takpa, dark midnight, I guess name. Its direction was south, its color blue. They emerged to the second world. Direction was south, its color blue, its mineral was silver. Coach's sieve. Chiefs upon it were Salvi spruce, Quahu eagle, and skunk Kalichiwa. Ya, Chi-yaw. It was a big land, and the people multiplied rapidly, spreading over it to all directions, even to the other side of the world. This did not matter, for they were so close together in spirit they could see and talk to each other from the center on top of the head. Because this door was still open, they felt close to Satuknang, and they sang joyful praises to the Creator. Tawa. They did not have the privilege of living with the animals, though, for the animals were wild and kept apart. Being separated from the animals, people tended to their own affairs. They built homes, then villages and trails between them. They made things with their hands and stored food like the ant people. Then they began to trade and barter with one another. The end of the second world. After their emergence, the people of the second world lived in harmony with each other. For a time, they built villages and linked them with trails. They began to trade food and handcrafted items between villages. This was when the trouble started. Everything they needed was on this second world, but they began to want more. More and more, they began to trade for things they didn't need, and the more goods they got, the more they wanted. This was very serious, for they did not realize they were drawing away step by step from the good life given them. They just forgot to sing joyful praises to the Creator, and soon began to sing praises to the goods they bartered and stored. Before long, it happened as it had to happen. The people began to quarrel and fight, and then wars between the villages began. There were still a few people in each village who sang the song of their creation, but the wicked people laughed at them until they could only sing it in their hearts. Even so, Sotaknang heard it through their centers in the centers of the earth. One day, he suddenly appeared before them. Spider-Woman tells me your thread is running out on this world, he said. That is too bad. The Spider Clan was your leader, and you were making good progress until this state of affairs began. Now my uncle, Taiwa, and I have decided we must do something about it. We are going to destroy this second world just as soon as we put you people who still have the song in your hearts in a safe place. So again, as on the first world, Sotaknang called on the ant people to open up their underground world for the chosen people. When they were safely underground, Sotaknang commanded the twins, Kokanghai Huya, Salon Palong Awao Hua, Huya, Polanga Huya, to leave their posts at the north and south ends of the world's axes where they were stationed to keep the Earth properly rotating. Like the poles, I guess. Twins had hardly abandoned their stations when the world, with no one to control it, teetered off balance, spun around crazily, then rolled over twice. Mountains plunged into the sea with a great splash. Seas and lakes sloshed over the land. And as the world spun through cold and lifeless space, it froze into solid ice. This makes me think of the Younger Dryas. For many years, all the elements that had comprised the second world were frozen into a motionless and lifeless lump of ice. Makes me think of possibly the second world really being Venus, like under the ground. Somewhere underground they're living, although maybe not like literally underground on Mercury. Just being such a fractal existence where we can't even physically see across the layers of dimensions, and we look at Mercury and it just looks like nothing's going on there relatively life-wise. Venus, same thing, but like because we're looking in the wrong wavelengths, maybe something of that nature. Their emissions are just not our emissions, so much so that we just don't see them. Maybe they don't live on the same like boundary that we see as a boundary. They see a different boundary. Like within the layers of stone to us is like a more good air perception of things, reality. I don't know, and then things change. Just some thoughts. I know it sounds ridiculous. Just entertaining that possibility instead of it all just occurring on this Earth specifically, which would really mean that the first world started around 550 million years ago, 650 million. But then it's just not really talking about before then because it was more in an incubation period. Like, that's possible. And more basic and more like it's all going on in the same world, literally. But it's possible that this world, the first world, is Mercury, that then goes through a supernova. And then the second world is Venus, that then goes through the first world's supernova, changing and transforming it into a new Earth, where it freezes not during the Younger Dryas freeze, but instead during the transformation from Venus to the new Earth, when it basically goes through the snowball Earth phase before like 650 million years in that time frame. Before it became like a pre-expansion Earth, it went through snowball Earth, theoretically, something of this nature, whereas it became entirely or nearly entirely frozen. So maybe it's possible that frozenness is more so this time frame than the and is it literally the end of the, and is this froze into solid ice, and then it came to an end, and then the third world, that's for many years, all they meant that because it were frozen into a motionless and lifeless lump of ice. But the people were happy and warm with the ant people in their underground world. They watched their food carefully, although the ants' waste became still smaller. They wove sashes and blankets together and told stories. Eventually, Sotuk Nang ordered the poles back to their stations at the poles of the world axis. The twins, with a great shudder and a splintering of ice, the planet began rotating again. Makes me think of Venus not really rotating. It began rotating again. When Venus becomes a new Earth, it begins rotating. When it's rotating smoothly about its axis and moving in its universal orbit, the ice began to melt and the world began to warm to life. So Takanang set about creating the third world, arranging lands and seas, planting mountains and plains with their proper coverings, and creating all forms of life. When the earth was ready for occupancy, he came to the ant Kiva with a proper approach as before and said, "Open the door, it is time for you to come out." Once again, when the Nuta was rolled back, he gave the people their instructions. "I have saved you so you can be planted again on this new third world. But you must always remember the two things I am saying to you now. First, respect me and one another. Second, sing in harmony from the tops of the hills. When I do not hear you singing praises to your Creator, I will know you have gone back to evil again." So the people climbed up the ladder from the ant Kiva, making their emergence to the third world. The name of this third world was Kushorva, its direction east, its color red. Chiefs upon it were the mineral and copper, the plants, tobacco, the bird, crow, and the animal antelope. Upon it once more the people spread out, multiplied, and continued their progress on the road of life. In the first world they had lived simply with the animals. In the second world they had developed handicrafts, homes, and villages. Now in the third world they created big cities and countries, a whole civilization. This made it difficult to conform to the plan of creation and to sing praises to Taowa and to Satugnang. More and more of them became wholly occupied with their own earthly plans. Some of them, of course, retained the wisdom granted them upon their emergence. With this wisdom, they understood that the further they went on the road of life, and the more that they developed, the harder it was. That was why their world was destroyed every so often, to give them a fresh start. They were especially concerned because so many people were using their reproductive power in wicked ways. That's very reminiscent of reproductive power in wicked ways with giants, the Nephilim, and the yeah. Fallen angels, daughters of man, or whatever. There was one woman who was becoming known throughout the land for her wickedness in corrupting so many people. She even boasted that so many men were giving her turquoise necklaces for her favors, she could wind them around a ladder that reached to the end of the world's axis. So the people with wisdom sang longer and louder, or sang with a wisdom sang longer and louder their praises to the Creator from the tops of the hills. The other people hardly heard them. Under the leadership of the Bo clan, they began to use their creative power in another evil and destructive way. Perhaps this was caused by that wicked woman, but some of them made a patuvata, a shield made of hide, and with her creative power made it flying through the air. On this, many people flew to a big city, attacked it, then returned so fast that no one knew where they came from. Soon, the people of many cities were making patubatas and flying on them to attack one another. Sounds like Vimanas. So corruption and war came to the third world as it had the others. The end of the third world. This time, Satuknang came to Spider Woman and said, "There is no use waiting until the thread runs out this time. Something has to be done, lest the people with the song in their hearts are corrupted and killed off too. It will be difficult with all this destruction going on for them to gather at the far end of the world where I have designated. But I will help them. Then you will save them when I destroy this world with water." "How shall I save them?" asked the Spider Woman. "When you get there, look about you," commanded Soteknang. "You will see these tall plants with hollow stems. Cut them down and put the people inside. I will tell you what to Then I will tell you what to do next." Spider Woman did as he instructed her. She cut down the hollow reeds, and as the people came to her, she put them inside with a little water and white cornmeal dough for food and sealed them up. When all the people were thus taken care of, so Teknang appeared. "Now you get in to take care of them, and I will seal you up. Then I will destroy the world." So he loosened the waters upon the earth. Waves higher than mountains rolled in upon the land. Continents broke asunder and sank beneath the seas, and still the rains fell. The waves rolled in. The people sealed up in their hollow reeds heard the mighty rushing of the waters. They felt themselves tossed high in the air and dropped back to the water. And dropping back to the water. Then all was quiet, and they knew they were floating. For a long, long time, so long a time that it seemed it would never end, they kept floating. I wonder why this rabbit shoots the sun is in the middle. Okay. Finally, their movement ceased. The Spider Woman unsealed their hollow reeds, took them by the top of their heads, and pulled them out. "Bring out all the food that is left over," she said. The people brought out their furusuki, cornmeal dough. It was still the same size, although they had been eating it all this time. Looking about them, they saw they were on a little piece of land that had been the top of one of their highest mountains. All else, as far as they could see, was water. This was all that remained of the third world. Easter Island? There must be some dry land somewhere we can go to. Where is the new fourth world that Sotuknang has created for us? They sent many kinds of birds, one after another, to fly over the waters and find it. But they all came back tired out, without having seen any sign of land. Next they planted a reed that grew high into the sky. Up it they climbed and stared over the surface of the waters. But they saw no sign of land. Then Sotuknang appeared to Spider Woman and said, "You must continue traveling on. Your inner wisdom will guide you. The door at the top of your head is open." So Spider Woman directed the people to make round, flat boats of the hollow reeds they had come in, and to crawl inside. Again they entrusted themselves to the water and the inner wisdom to guide them. For a long time they drifted with the wind and the movement of the waters, and came to another rocky island. "It is bigger than the other one, but it is not big enough," they said, looking around them and thinking they heard low rumbling noise. "No, it is not big enough," said Spider Woman. So the people kept traveling toward the rising sun in the reed boats. After a while, they said, "There is that low rumbling noise we heard. We must be coming to land again." So it was a big land, it seemed, with grass and trees and flowers, beautiful to their weary eyes. On it they rested a long time. Some of the people wanted to say, but Spider Woman wanted to stay, but Spider Woman said, "No, it is not the place. You must continue on." Leaving their boats, they traveled by foot eastward across the island to the water's edge. Here they found growing some more of the hollow plants like reeds or bamboo, which they cut down. Directed by Spider Woman, they laid some of these in a row with another row on top of them in the opposite direction and tied them together with vines and leaves. This made a raft big enough for one family or more. When enough rafts were made for all, Spider Woman directed them to make paddles. You will be going uphill from now on, and you will have to make your own way. So Sotuknang told you the further you go, the harder it gets. After long and weary traveling, still east and a little north, the people began to hear the low rumbling noise and saw land. One family and clan after another landed with joy. The land was long. The land was long, wide, and beautiful. The earth was rich and flat, covered with trees and plants, seed bearers and nut bearers, providing lots of food. Sorry, guys. The earth was rich and flat, covered with trees and plants, seed bearers and nut bearers, providing lots of food. The people were happy and kept staying there year after year. No, this is not the fourth woman, or fourth world, Spider Woman kept telling them. It is too easy and pleasant for you to live on, and you would soon fall into evil ways again. You must go on. Have we not told you that the way becomes harder and longer? Reluctantly, the people traveled eastward by foot across island to the far shore. Again, they made rafts and paddles. When they were ready to set forth, Spider Woman said, "Now I've done all I've been commanded to do for you. You must go on alone, and find your own place of emergence. Just keep your doors open, and your spirit will guide you." "Thank you, Spider Woman, for all you have done for us," they said sadly. "We will remember what you have said." The two war gods, wanderings, wind god, origin myth, maybe we could creation, coming of the Hopi from the underworld. A long time ago, the people were living below. There were a great many of them, but they were often quarreling with one another. Some of them were very much depraved. They abused the women and the maidens, and that led to very many contentions. So the chiefs, who were worried and angry over this, had a council and concluded that they would try to find another place to live. So they first sent out a bird named Matsni to find a place of exit from this world. He flew up high, but was too weak and returned without having been successful. They then sent the mockingbird, Yapa. It's like I can't read letters because they're in words of. That's an H. It's a Y, but it's an H. It's an H. Hapa. Sure. Yeah, dude, that's it. He was strong and flew up very high and found a place of exit. Returning, he reported this to the chiefs. In the meanwhile, the chiefs had caused a great flood. Many Balolokongus came out of the ground with the water, and a great portion of the people were destroyed. Whatever that is. When the mockingbird had made his report to the chiefs, the latter said, "All right, that is good. We are going away from here." They then announced through the crier that in 4 days they would leave, and that the women should prepare some food, and after that they had eaten on the fourth day, they would all assemble to the place right under the opening which the mockingbird had found. This was done. Okay, I don't want to read the whole thing. You guys can check this out later if you're interested. It's pretty long. Alright. The sun was created. Whoa. White people. That's probably not actually like modern interpretation of white people at all. It's probably more like a clan-based thing that's not really about skin. Okay. See y'all in the next one. Peace out. I don't know what to make of it. I'm just thought I'd read it. It looks possibly applicable to the expanding Earth process and all the Dwarka related stuff I talk about. So, exactly how, it's just good to be aware of possible nuances, to be like, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Oh. I'm not saying that happened, but it could happen. So, alright. Peace out.